On June 1, 2009, Air France Flight 447 departed Rio de Janeiro at 19:29 local time, bound for Paris. The aircraft was an Airbus A330-203, registration FGZCP. On board were 228 people, 216 passengers, and 12 crew members. The flight was routine, operated daily, with an experienced crew and a modern aircraft. Weather along the equatorial Atlantic was active but common for this route. At cruising altitude, most systems were automated, reducing pilot workload. The cockpit environment was calm, professional, and quiet. No distress was reported. No anomaly was detected. At this stage, the flight was statistically one of the safest moments in aviation. What followed was not a dramatic mechanical failure, but a slow psychological unraveling. This crash would later be remembered not for fire or explosion, but for confusion. For several minutes, the aircraft remained structurally intact and fully powered, yet the crew gradually lost their understanding of what the plane was doing. Air France 447 would become a case study not of broken machines, but of human limits under stress and uncertainty. After departure, Flight 447 climbed smoothly to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Time was approximately 02:10 UTC. Outside the cockpit, the night was completely dark, with no visible horizon. The aircraft approached a zone of towering thunderstorms typical of the intertropical convergence zone. Inside the cockpit, the autopilot and auto-thrust systems were engaged. The pilots monitored instruments, exchanged casual remarks, and followed standard procedures. This phase of flight is known as a high-trust period, where automation performs most tasks. Psychologically, prolonged automation reduces alertness and manual flying readiness. The human brain adapts to stability and predictability. When systems work perfectly for hours, vigilance fades. This is not negligence, but natural cognitive adaptation. The aircraft entered high-altitude clouds containing ice crystals invisible to radar. No warning suggested danger. At that moment, the crew had no reason to anticipate a crisis. The flight progressed normally until a minor sensor malfunction quietly altered everything the pilots believed to be true. At approximately 02:10:05 UTC, ice crystals obstructed the aircraft's pitot tubes, which measure airspeed. As a result, the flight computers received inconsistent speed data. The aircraft itself was flying normally, but its instruments disagreed. This type of failure is subtle and deeply dangerous. Humans rely on consistent information to build situational awareness. When data conflicts, the brain instinctively selects one version of reality. At 02:10:14 UTC, the autopilot disengaged automatically. The auto-thrust disconnected as well. Control was returned to the pilots without a clear explanation. This sudden transition increased workload instantly. The pilots were required to manually fly at high altitude in turbulence at night with unreliable instruments. There was no single alarm explaining the situation. Instead, there was ambiguity. Ambiguity is one of the most stressful cognitive states. It forces the brain to decide without certainty. This moment marked the true beginning of the accident, not through violence, but through confusion introduced faster than the mind could adapt. The junior first officer was flying when control was lost. Believing the aircraft was overspeeding or descending, he pulled back on the side stick. In reality, the aircraft was neither overspeeding nor descending dangerously. This mismatch between perception and reality is known as mode confusion. The Airbus flight control system shifted from normal law to alternate law, reducing protections against stalls. However, this change was not clearly understood in the cockpit. The pilots assumed the system would prevent unsafe attitudes. Psychologically, automation creates an expectation of protection. When that protection disappears silently, humans continue to act as if it remains. The aircraft's nose rose steadily, angle of attack increased. Instead of recognizing a stall scenario, the pilots interpreted symptoms as unrelated problems. Stress narrowed their attention. They focused on numbers, not aerodynamics. Their mental model of the aircraft no longer matched reality. Once perception diverges from truth, corrective actions can worsen the situation. This chapter represents the point where human intuition, shaped by automation, began working against survival.
At 0210 UTC, the aircraft entered an aerodynamic stall. The stall warning sounded, then stopped, then sounded again. This inconsistency was caused by invalid airspeed data. To the human brain, repeated alarms without stable meaning become noise. This phenomenon is known as alarm fatigue. Instead of increasing urgency, alerts lose emotional impact. The pilots believed they were climbing, when in fact, the aircraft was descending rapidly. The engines continued producing thrust. The wings remained attached. The aircraft was flyable, yet no one verbalized the word stall. Cognitive overload prevented synthesis of information. Each pilot processed fragments, but no shared understanding emerged. Stress reduces working memory and slows reasoning. The captain, returning to the cockpit, faced a chaotic situation with no clear narrative. Rebuilding awareness under such pressure is extremely difficult. For over 4 minutes, the aircraft fell while control inputs continued in the wrong direction. This was not panic. It was misinterpretation sustained by human cognitive limits.
From 35,000 feet, Air France 447 descended continuously for approximately 4 minutes and 23 seconds. The vertical speed exceeded 10,000 feet per minute. During this time, the aircraft remained powered and structurally intact. The pilots made inputs, discussed readings, and attempted to understand the situation. However, stress impaired their ability to step back and reassess. This is known as cognitive tunneling. Under extreme pressure, the brain fixates on immediate details and loses global awareness. The captain asked questions, but answers were incomplete. No one fully grasped that the aircraft was stalled from nose-up input. The absence of clear visual cues amplified disorientation. Night, weather, and automation dependence combined into a psychological trap. There was no dramatic moment of realization. The descent continued steadily. The ocean approached unseen. Inside the cockpit, confusion persisted until the end. These minutes demonstrate how a functioning aircraft can be lost when human perception collapses faster than training can compensate. At 2:14:28 UTC, Air France Flight 447 struck the Atlantic Ocean. Impact was violent and unsurvivable. All 228 people on board died instantly. Victims came from 33 countries, including families, children, and scientists traveling to an international conference. The wreckage sank nearly 4,000 meters below the surface. For 2 years, the main debris field and flight recorders remained undiscovered. In 2011, the black boxes were finally recovered. Analysis revealed no structural failure, no engine malfunction, and no fire. The official cause cited unreliable airspeed data, inappropriate pilot responses, loss of situational awareness, and inadequate training for high-altitude stall recovery. The aircraft did exactly what physics demanded. It was human understanding that failed. This discovery shocked investigators and pilots worldwide. It proved that modern aircraft can remain flyable until impact, while crews unknowingly guide them toward disaster.
Air France 447 is remembered not for chaos, but for quiet failure. The pilots did not scream, they did not give up, they worked until the end. Yet human cognition has limits. Under stress, the brain simplifies reality, narrows focus, and clings to familiar patterns. Automation, while improving safety, also reshapes intuition. When it fails unexpectedly, humans may respond incorrectly without realizing it. This crash changed aviation training worldwide. Pilots now practice manual flying and high-altitude stalls more rigorously. But the deeper lesson remains psychological. Technology cannot eliminate human vulnerability. It can only delay its appearance. The black box recorded sounds and data, but not the moment the crew realized something was fundamentally wrong. For several minutes, they were alive, flying, and unaware of their true situation. Air France 447 stands as a reminder that the most dangerous failure is not mechanical, but cognitive, and it often happens silently. After Air France Flight 447, stall training was fundamentally redesigned. Pilot psychology became central to aviation safety, and our faith in automation was permanently questioned. Yet the dead do not return. This tragedy is not remembered for its violence. It is remembered for its profound, fatal confusion. For 4 minutes, 228 people were alive, trapped inside a perfectly functional aircraft whose fate was already sealed. Among them were the men on the flight deck, Captain Marc Dubois, First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonin, and Relief First Officer David Robert. They did not face a mechanical monster. They faced the terrifying limits of human cognition. Not panic, not negligence, but a moment where reality itself became unreadable. The black box recorded the sounds, but it could not capture the paralyzing instant when meaning dissolved into incomprehensible chaos. If stories like this matter to you, stories that explain not just what happened, but why the human mind failed under pressure, subscribe to the channel. Because understanding these moments is how we prevent them from happening again. Between life and death.